Hello, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level, as always. And to interact with us, we love seeing you every Thursday night, live, 9:30 Eastern, in Facebook and YouTube land. So hello and good evening. Chats are always fun. Can't get to them all, but your chats may show up in the show. And if you can't catch us live, catch us on the replay or in your favorite podcasting app. You know me, John Rewart, past master, Patriot Lodge, 1957, Fairfax, Virginia. Next up, Jason Richards. Hello and good evening.
Hello and good evening. Jason Richards, past master, Vacation Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia.
Woo!
Glad to be here.
Glad to see you. Next up,
Better
Robert Johnson.
Seen than had.
Robert Johnson, past master, Waukegan 78, and also past master of Spes Novum 1183 in Illinois, the premier education lodge here in the state. And current sitting secretary of both of those lodges in perpetuity, which is just fine with me. Keeps me involved. Anyway, happy to be here. Happy to talk about tonight's topic, which is one that I think is near and dear to us all. So, thanks.
Indeed. Last but not least, Joe and James. I forgot we had that.
God damn it. Hello and good evening. This is Joe Martinez, past and current master of Manassas Lodge number 182 in Manassas, Virginia, the premier lodge that seems to invite James Buckhorn once a year to come jibber jabber with us. And this fella, who are you?
Hey, I'm James A. Buckhorn. I'm a past master of Pentalpha Lodge number 564 in Indianapolis, Indiana, in the sitting master of two lodges, actually. Lodge St. Andrew number 775 in Auburn, Indiana, a Scottish Concept Lodge, and the Dwight L. Smith Lodge of Research, Indiana's only research lodge. Pretty psyched to be out here again. I love coming to the deep south of North America here in Virginia.
Deep south.
Wow. Deep south, that is Northern Virginia.
I assume that's why I saw statues of Lee for sale at the hotel here. So
that's what happens when we put you up in a Motel 6.
If nothing else happens this evening, the listeners and those of you watching live will love the quick wit of James Buckhorn. So
It is Quicksilver.
he is.
Nice. Awesome.
One might say unhinged.
One might say.
One might say.
One might also say, to support the show, head over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable. So thanks to all the support over the years. Look, we got our very own Vanna White here. Look at this.
Wow.
So
thanks.
My part.
I'm doing my part.
I didn't do anyway.
But that's not important.
Wait a second. Did you just make a Tim Robinson? I think you should leave. Oh, that's cool. Okay. All right. Yeah, we all know where that went. Okay.
Indeed.
Can't say the full thing or we'll get demonetized.
That is true.
It's true.
Let's see. Moving on to the next segue. We all.
Everybody's favorite time of the show.
It is.
We must.
Even for James.
Tarot card of the week.
Oh, look at that.
Ooh.
Pick a card, any card, Jason.
Any card. All right. The deck is supposed to pick. So this week, just doing my daily driver, the Transient Light Tarot by artist Ari Weissner.
I have a transient in my room with me.
Pretty soon, they're not going to have guns anymore. We
You say-
have the
Who's that?
Knight of Cups.
The knapsack.
the saddleback of cups,
The Toomey of Cups.
the Cotopaxi of cups.
So that's a nice pull. I'm a friend of the Cocopaxi.
So, this is actually a really good card to pull because
You sound
Knight of Cups.
surprised.
I am very surprised, but you know, the deck does its thing, right? Tonight we're going to talk about logical discourse, and the Knight of Cups is usually associated with action-oriented dreamers, right? Or artists, even. So people who think with their emotions and go off and chase windmills. So we're trying to avoid some of that tonight by using logical discourse instead.
Yeah, I think it could be, you know, it's like a diplomatic messenger of feelings and values in a very controlled and meaningful manner.
I dig it.
You dig it?
Yep,
He does too.
Great.
we're like the Knights of Me over here.
What is it?
Who art thou?
Ah, goodness. Okay, well, enough of that. That was fun. Let's get into tonight's topic, which is about a different set of working tools that we should be carrying with us, and that is the cognitive working tools that Masons should be using and applying. And so while we've covered things like logical fallacies and cognitive biases, now the whole package comes together. And so we wanted to give our special guest, worship brother James A. Buckhorn, the chance to kind of go through his musing, his research, his thoughts and opinions on the state of discourse in society today and how, as Masons, we should apply a better way of being out in the world. So anything you want to kick things off or add to that, Brother James?
No, and just a note for the listeners. It these guys like to spring surprises on me. So up until about 45 seconds ago, I was under the impression that we would be talking about Roger Christian's adaptation of L. Ron Hubbard's book, Battlefield Earth, the 2000 movie. So if I seem a little unhinged, I'm just trying to catch up.
That's next
Told
week.
you at dinner
That's
what we were
next.
talking about. You had at least 2 hours.
Correct.
I love
Who-
Battlefield Earth.
Who are you going to believe?
So, John, maybe don't start with him and maybe set the stage because our guest is scared of the conversation.
No,
All right.
Wait a second. So a couple of years ago, actually, yeah, it was a couple of years ago now, James Buckhorn delivered a talk on the first night of, it was our second Masonicon Chicago. James came out and did a talk that was really interesting and centered around this idea. And I think his talk was basically, in a nutshell, mentors tell you a lot of amazing things about Masonry, but it's up to you to do your due diligence using all of your resources and, of course, logical fallacies and things of that nature that to sort of make sense of things, And I think since that time, his argument for the importance of this has only grown. In fact, it was the theme of when just last year at the Midwest Conference of Masonic Education when James was the president. So maybe that helps set you up a little bit, James, but it means a lot to a lot of us what you're pushing for.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Robert. In that talk that I rewrote in the 6 or 7 minutes I was at the hotel, because I had a conversation with a friend of ours, Chad Kopensky from Ohio. I'd been driving up there, and I'd been thinking about my talk, which was going to kind of kick off the conference, and what could I do to set the tone? What could I do to kind of frame the rest of the conference in a valuable way that the attendees would appreciate, right? We opened the Masonic Lodge in a manner that could be argued is esoteric or maybe not esoteric at all. But either way, it serves as a separation between what we were doing, and then we have this pause, this period where we're going through this. I don't know if repetitive is the right word, but we're going through this known thing that kind of sheds the outside world from our focus, at least, right? I thought I could
ritualistic.
Yeah, if only there were words for what I'm talking about, but we don't have time for that. And so my thought was, how do I kind of bring everyone in, get their attention, and kind of give them a lens, and that'll come up later, a lens to look through during the presentation. And so I kind of started it, and I said, I was driving up here in my Silverado, and it made me kind of miss the trips I used to take to Chicago in my little blue S10 that Grandpa had sold me back in the day. It was a 2000 S10 extended cab, medium blue, not the powder baby blue, not the dark blue, but this perfect medium metallic blue that just sparkled in the sunlight. It really was a beautiful truck. I hit 4 deer with it at once and had to get a new one, but I miss it. And I was reminiscing on how my grandfather had kind of turned over possession to me. I'm the third James Buckhorn in the paternal line. We have different middle names, but one day 3 James Buckhorns went to the BMV here in Indiana, and we transferred that truck to me. I'd been paying it off over time, and that was the day. But Grandpa took me around, and he showed me quite a few things. He had a notepad that he had noted every oil change on regular service. He had a pen that went with it. It had its spot in the truck. He had one of those little stick tire gauges that you put on the tire and it puffs it out, and you can check the PSI. He implored me to, check your tire pressure frequently. This was a 2000. It didn't have TPMS sensors in it. And, most importantly, I think what he did was he really implored me, and he quoted cover to cover, read the owner's manual cover to cover. It's got everything you need to know. Not only did he show me the things the way he did it, but he implored me to go to the source, what we would call a primary document, and look at it myself, verify it for myself. And he popped the hood and, propped the stick up and was pointing things out. And he goes, he's telling me about oil changes and where to put different fluids. And, I was at an age where I probably would have said, okay, Grandpa, no matter what he said. But if Grandpa would have said, and every oil change you do, make sure you put a cap full of moonshine in the reservoir, I probably would have said, okay, Grandpa, why? And he might have said,
a tablespoonful of sugar.
Exactly, right? That's what we need. He would say, I'm not sure, but my grandfather told me to do it that way. Huh. Isn't that like the Masonic experience where our mentors have done the hard work? They've made the mistakes. They've given us the easy way, hopefully. But they've said, hey, brother, go look this up. Go read the Masonic law. Go read your monitor and ritual cipher. Look for yourself. Verify that it's there. Isn't that what the Masonic experience and mentorship should hopefully be like in some way? Is not just believe what I said, but go verify it for yourself, right? Like the game of telephone, or if we're using water as an analogy, I want you to taste the clear water that I've gotten, but go get it yourself and get as close to the source, because, we can talk about hops if we're into, networking and stuff like that. But how many hops is it to the source is always the question, right? when Joe says, hey, this is the rule, by the way, blah, 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 I've added a hop to the tree. I'm another hop down. But if he says, go look at the documentation, I've removed the entire distance to 1. And it's not he said that he said that he said. It's, well, I've read it here and you can too. And then it's my job to do that for the next person.
Well, let's
It's an authoritative source, right?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of where I was getting to. And if we're gonna bring it back to masonry, I was so enraptured in your story. But I did want to bring it back to masonry where, and I think you said it, so kudos, because otherwise I would have said it for you. I think that's the idyllic situation. That's what we want it to be, right? We want our mentors to do that for us and lead us down that road. But, you know, I think we would all agree in general, there is a lack of mentoring in masonry. There's a lot of, hey, we got to get dudes in, we got to get them, we got to fill the seats, and then we just leave them hanging, right? And
Double legal program. Ooh.
I'm gonna rev up John's, you know, data-driven brain here, because the numbers show that we're not doing the thing that you said that we're doing, because people are not hanging around, right? They're hanging around for a year or 2 or whatever. They're not getting any sort of mentorship whatsoever, good, bad, or indifferent. And they're walking out the door because there's nobody providing them a path forward, right? It's like, welcome, here's your dues card, pay your dues, and figure it out on your own. And the problem,
I was just going to say, to an extent, I mean, I think in a large part of the country where masonry is operating, it comes down to communication level and like, I don't want to get onto a tangent of socionomics, but like in areas where email and electronic communication still aren't the norm, you still will find people gathering. And you find this much more in the United States anyway. It happens much more in the South. The Southeast is a great place. And like places like Georgia, for instance, where I've heard many firsthand accounts of that's what my mentor said. And these mentors are like,
oh yeah,
deities to brothers.
Icons, yes.
Icon, yeah. And they can do no wrong. And yet what those mentors have said to them, they've repeated to me. And because I'm socially aware of the way they feel, I don't inject like a correction. I'm just like, oh, that's surprising to me. And I lock it away and I talk about it with other people without mentioning names or whatever. It's just, it's the only way I know how to do it, because I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. But like, I think that does actually have, it's probably less now than it used to be, but there's probably still a good third of the country where I think mentorships and things still really are that element.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you in terms of the numbers. My point in equating what James was saying was, and I think you touched on it, was that type of behavior that you were talking about. It really foments that, well, we've always done it this way mentality, right? So, you know, as opposed to James's story of like, oh, you know what? If my granddad told me to, you know, put a cube of sugar into the gas tank, I wouldn't have, you know, questioned it. But now me, James, now adult James, would have been like,
yeah,
probably a little bit more.
Well,
you know?
well, so if you look at like, okay, like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Alexander the Great, the goal should be, it's not always the case, but the goal should be not just to convey information and have the telephone game last one more generation. A goal of a good mentor should be to actually have the mentee surpass the mentor. Right? So you're not just teaching them ritual, you're not just having them you know, parrot words back, but think for themselves and hopefully come up with some new insight that makes them a better mason, a better person that could provide more value than where you left it, right? You plant the tree that you'll never be able to sit under. That's the goal of good discourse and good, you know.
Yeah, it's the hermit, man. Like,
yeah,
you're standing up there with the light. You've kind of gone as far as you can, and so now You get somebody up to you, and then, what I think it was the first time I ever actually heard the quote, but I think it was you or Jason who, you guys quoted Newton. If I've seen further, it's because I stood on the backs of giants or the shoulders of giants or something.
Exactly.
Along those lines. And I think that's probably a whole conversation in and of itself. The idea that there are a lot of kind of ego-driven, title-driven Masons out there who don't necessarily always feel like if they were to give you that leg up, they'd be doing themselves they feel like they'd be doing themselves a disservice.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I can't be the guy now. It's like, no, please take this job.
Yeah, exactly. Funny story about that quote, by the way. Some people believe that quote has a double meaning because one of the other known scientific authors in that time period actually had a hunchback, and so they thought it was a backhanded compliment. And if I've seen further, it's because I stood on the shoulders of this giant over here. Yeah. But so I think one thing that one trend that I'm hearing is that we invest as human beings a lot of emotional weight to things we hear, where we hear it from, which tribe we're in, and we often ascribe more validity to those things that emotionally feel good. Whether it is aligning to a cognitive bias, whether it's aligning to whatever our priors are that we want it to be true. Like Robert's poster back there, I want to believe, therefore aliens exist. Right, Joe?
Well, yeah, no, and would love to hear James A. Buckhorn's thoughts on this. But I think that, one thing that is a bit more sticky when it comes to Masonry is when you have those younger or those new Masons, there's also, in addition to everything that you said, John, there's this hunger, right? It's like, I want to know, I have to know, tell me the next thing. So that kind of colors the conversation, right? Where are they getting their info from? The right info, or is it just info that's been transmitted via telephone through generations? And it depends, I think, where you are, who you are, and who you're surrounded by. James?
I got lost in thought and I lost my place. I think it's interesting. There was a lesson that I picked up on, ironically, from the man and the brother who is now the Grand Master in Indiana, Randy Seipel. I used to feel this pressure to come up with my next talk, my next paper. But then I saw that, back then Randy, right now Most Worshipful, would take this one presentation, whatever it was, and he'd go and give it 20, 30 times. And I've been lucky enough to see his presentation on the 133rd Psalm a few times, and it's been different and better every time. And it kind of flipped a little bit of a switch for me, where I realized this wasn't about the quantity, this was about perfecting. And I wouldn't even say quality necessarily, but I think there's a virtue in going over something over and over, whether it's a concept or area of your life, multiple times until you've put in work, good work, true work, square work. One of the analogies I use, I don't know if our viewers are old enough to remember what running HD Tune or Rikuva or some of these hardware diagnostics tools on a hard drive, a conventional spinning hard drive, looked like. But if you're picturing a rectangular shape with a grid pattern in it, and you're doing a hard drive scan, and maybe it's a defrag, maybe it's not, ideally it's going to come up with a green square as it slowly progresses along. If you have a bad hard drive or you're not doing quick scan. Bear Share, LimeWire, FrostWire. Yeah, no, I don't, Napster. I don't know what those are, but brothers, perfect. So right. And in some different versions of these software, there's a different color square that come up. The one that conceptually would make the most sense to our viewers is probably orange, yellow, red, with red being, a bad sector that's gone. And without getting into the field of storage, this is our life, right? When someone comes to us and we interact with them, it's a touch point. And whether they're saying directly, James, you got something to reflect on, or like Robert, they come up and they say something that sounds outside of the scope of his known knowledge, and maybe he has a gut feeling that it's malarkey, or just hooey, which I think there's a difference between those two, but I'm no expert.
We say that down here,
and we don't have time to talk about that now. But
yes,
people are so entrenched in that emotional feeling. Right. I was talking to Terrence Rowe from Indiana. He's a warden at my lodge, up at Lodge St. Andrew. I was talking to him at Supreme Council NMJ week and a half ago, and he's worked in education for a long time. He's recently transitioned to working for the Scottish Rite. But his background in education has given me some interesting insights, and I forget who it was. He asked me if I was familiar with their work, and I said no, and he said, that's all right. Most people, in education aren't either. But I read his book, and my takeaway was that the first idea, the first concept that someone is exposed to is the one that takes hold, right? And it's kind of what we're talking about here, where, the first one to tell
it's your foundation that you now have to base everything else off of, right? Mm-hmm.
Right, and it's stuck in the mud or the cement, and it's below grade, and it's been raining. So I think it's very interesting because of how true that is, right? And in the same way that you have to receive news as twice as good or more as bad news for it to really have, a linear impact. It's the same. You really have to come up with a lot to detrench someone from their position, whether I'm trying to softly deliver the news to people before my forget-me-not presentation that, hey, this meaningful thing with this incredible story that had this great emotional appeal, because we all want to believe that little tag on the back of the card that they send out isn't really true. And even now I'm pulling my punch. It's not true at all, right? And we're not going to get into that, but I go to lengths to present that in a way because I don't want people to be upset. And I know that we have the proclivity to be upset. And why wouldn't you be if some bearded ruffian that looks like he could either be a blacksmith or work in IT comes into your lodge and he gives this presentation that says, hey, what's your daddy or granddaddy pinned on your chest the night you were raised? And the story you were told by that well-meaning man that you have so much respect for isn't true. People, they're liable to, throw you out of the lodge. They hate that, right? I go to lengths to exactly. And that's the problem, right? How can we as a society change? And that's my question is, how can we change to reflect that? If we go back to that hard drive scan and kind of reconceptualize our duty as Masons and as individuals, if I'm an Eagle Scout and we had to take a few citizenship merit badges. And if you think about your role as a citizen in the community, right? I like to think about it like that, right? If someone says, hey, oh, I never heard that before. I actually heard this. Instead of getting emotionally agitated, instead of getting your hackles up and having that as your default response, maybe even a trauma response, you should see it as an opportunity. That's what I posit. You should see it as an opportunity for self-improvement and actually a favor. And if we can change our mental thinking and the way we frame that instead of saying, screw this guy for daring to question something I know that daddy taught me, into, oh, my goal is to be as accurate as possible because that actually makes me better. This person's doing me a big favor right now, whether they've said it respectfully or not. It's an opportunity for me, if I'm looking at all the yellow and red on my hard drive scan of myself, I have an opportunity to turn this block green or at least get it closer to green. And that's the goal. And I think it's completely unmasonic to be aware of this and to not pursue it.
Well,
which is where the working tools come in the knowledge of biases and fallacies.
No, I absolutely love everything you said. And I think it speaks to, and I love that you tied it back to masonry, because with all the symbols of all the different working tools that we're ingrained with, right? Symbolically, we very rarely, as Masons, a lot of us, not all of us, don't take that out into the world. And the big one is that you touched on is, and we all do it. We do it at work. We do it in our homes. We do it in lodge. We don't listen to actually hear what the person is saying. We listen to respond to what they're saying. So we're not, like you said, we're not taking in that input and processing it and thinking about it. All we're doing is thinking about what the response that we're going to have to the thing that you said, right? So if you continue to do that, you're never going to have a logical conversation. All you're going to do is respond and sometimes attack what that person is saying, right? Whether the words are coming out or not, you know. Perfect example. And then I'll let somebody else talk. I think the first time you came here to Manassas, you did the Forget Me Not talk, right? And I distinctly remember, I knew what the talk was. I distinctly remember looking down at the crowd, and I could see people getting visibly upset with the things that he was saying, right? And he is 100% correct. He told the story very nice. There was no negative connotations of it, like, hey, here's the history of this, and this is where it came from, and this is why it became so pervasive. And everything he said was logical and had data to support it. But before he even got to the touch points, people were already pissed off. And I could tell. And I'm like, yeah, they're mad. They're not going to listen to anything else he's saying. And it's 100% true.
You know, that was an interesting presentation because to kind of prove a point, I'd had this idea, you know, and now that I think about it, I'd been in church and some people had gone to some, you know, Bible camp or something, and they recapped it for us when they got back. The staff did, and they said, kind of to illustrate some point, they had someone come out and they were, you know, kind of speaking and saying things about the religion that were very positive, and people were saying, yeah, and then they were quoting tenets. And as they went on, they started to get more and more into things that weren't true. And you know, a lot of the people were still chanting, yeah, because they were kind of taken up with it. But they did this to teach a lesson. And I didn't draw that correlation till later, but I showed up and I think we kind of kept the topic hidden maybe a little bit, and didn't really advertise too much what it was about. And I said, maybe it's about lapel pens, or it's about something really important. And so I started out this presentation with a slideshow saying, you know, I'm proud to be here. I'm excited to be here with my friend. And actually, you know, tonight we're going to be talking about a very important Mason. And I hit the slide button, and it was it said Joseph T. Martinez or something. And Martinez, or, you know, I don't know, there was an accent marker, whatever.
There always is.
And I started to very confidently deliver facts, 100% true facts. Joe served in the Army. He was a warrant officer, canine handler, right? You know, and I was slowly threw in these things that people that know Joe, especially the guys at his own lodge, should know this, right? Everyone starts nodding. People are nodding throughout the audience. And then you get to the stuff where it's I said he was a DDGM for district whatever, and it was not even a real district or something, right? So I'm saying this stuff. I'm misrepresenting the amount of time he spent in the Army. I lied about his height. I guessed his height, and then I chose something completely different. And the picture of Joe was actually, I used some face morph tool. It was actually a combination of Robert's face and Joe's face, like 70% Joe's, 30% Robert's. So it wasn't quite right for people that knew Joe. And at the end, I had put a website like joemartinez.com, and I said, you know, and people had started to and it went really well. It went as I hoped it would. people were saying, they were kind of giving weird looks after a while and shaking their head. Sorry, what? No, he's not. He's not 5'3". Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's like, I'm sorry, guys. This is really embarrassing. I hope I can handle this gracefully if you give me a moment. But just imagine being flown out somewhere to give a talk, and you get one wrong thing about a guy very publicly in front of his lodge. Give me a second to recover. And so I'm going on, and people are shaking their head. And I played it off, I think successfully, maybe, where people really believe that I had blundered. And then we get to the next couple slides, and they realize this is all a ruse. I've kind of prepared this. I didn't really warn Joe about it. This is what can happen. Someone well-meaning, introduced with respect especially, some dignified person or storied, introduction, and the stage is set for them and for you to believe what they say, right? Especially in the Masonic fraternity with a mentor, with a public speaker who's been on, they've got their name printed on the program. You're set up to believe them. You're already predisposed to not question what they're saying too much, unless you have these tools, unless you've reflected on this. And I was saying to the guys before the show, hey, National Treasure was released on November 19th, which was the date I was raised, not the year I was raised, but, the Gates family, they get the Ben Franklin glasses. And they've got different glasses, and I'm sure if you Google Ben Franklin glasses, it'll come up. But it's basically, they've got little lenses you can tip up and down. And I thought this was very on the nose, very apropos for the way that we've been thinking about the Masonic everyday carry. We talk about the working tools and how we can kind of focus and look through the concept of it. Well, the allegory of a lens is that you actually look through the lens and it kind of changes what you see. We say rose-tinted glasses typically to mean kind of a rosy version of events or history, or a more favorable but not accurate. Interesting. In perfect illustration of these glasses, right? And the idea is you can flip them up and have your regular lenses. But allegorically, if these were working tools or knowledge of biases or fallacies, you could flip them down to reflect on a situation. You could find the right combination to kind of really assess what you're looking at. And I think that's incredibly important. There's two websites. Well,
it's covered in 300-year-old skin flakes.
The Ben Franklin skin flakes.
Think about this, James. What if? Let's just. I'll pick.
No, I love that metaphor though. That's really cool.
Pick something like those glasses are on, right? And let's say Nick Cage is an advocate for something like Confederate degree teams, and he puts the rose-colored ones down, and it's like, ooh, heritage reenactment. And then he puts down the other one that's like biases and stuff, and he sees the words like intent doesn't control impact.
Ooh,
Imagery communicates exclusion to many brethren in the public. Oh, singling out one side abandons impartiality. Disclaimers don't outweigh visual messages of external perception. Oh my God. And then all of a sudden, right, you become self-aware of these issues that are very real today. Yeah, they live.
They live.
Yeah, I've come here to chew bubble gum and anyway, yeah, he's all out of bubble gum. Yeah, I love that allegory as well, James.
Well, Robert, you're Italian, and yeah, where's this going?
I don't know.
And you're in Chicago, a place known for black and white cookies.
Terrible pizza.
Black and white cookies. Black and white, like the black and white fallacy. Wow, see, it was like a segue, but different. It was like a good segue, but different. There's two websites I really yourlogicalfallacyis.com and yourbias.is. And they both have 24 different tiles representing, whatever the website name is. So logical fallacies. And one of them is black and white. In high school, we had to read and watch a few movies that were supposed to impart some point. But for me as a teenager, were just incredibly depressing. And I think it was like The Kite Runner or 1,000 Splendid Suns, maybe. And the movie, I think the dad in the movie, in the early part of the movie, says something like, he's talking about sins and different specific sins. And he said something from my recollection that said, there are a bunch of sins, but all sins for the most part lead back to stealing. When you do X, you're stealing someone's right to X. When you do this, you're stealing this from someone. And I was kind of focused on this concept before I knew what the name was, black or white rather. And, I feel pretty strongly that, maybe if there was an important fallacy, this would be near the top, because I think a lot of fallacies go back to this one.
I totally agree with that. Absolutely. Because one of the notes that I was taking as you were talking here is that, and I'll add kind of a nice to be known thing, is I have had people reach out to me because there are times where I can look at the nuance, because there is usually some gray in between, of what's being said or what's being portrayed. And there's a lot of power in like just saying, okay, so it's partly right? It's not black or white. It's not true. It's not false, but it's half true. And here's the additional context you need to know about something. And that is a superpower in today's society, where everything is either all in or all out. You're on my side, or you're either with me, you're against me, right? But man, it is hard living in the middle. To say, well, yes, I agree with you on this specific point, and here's another piece of information, or another piece of context, or another side, or another way to even look at the same thing. Back to the lenses, right? It's that you can have the same picture, looking at it through different lenses can actually have different results. And how do you know this? Watch the same news event on CNN and watch the same news event on Fox News, right? Same event, right? But it could be completely differently portrayed.
Well, more to your point about living in the gray, number one, in such a charged society that we live in, right? Not in, well, sometimes inside the lodge, unfortunately, but just in general, in such a charged climate, you're actually chastised or belittled for riding that line in the middle. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be on this side or on this side. You're not allowed to be
exactly
allowed to have that middle ground, right? So there's a lot of pressure to unfortunately end up on a certain side of a conversation, even though you may not want to, or your common sense tells you that's probably not the place to be. And I think for a lot of people, again, especially in our social media world, you're pushed into one way or the other. But the point of interrupting you was, you made a great point with like, watch the same news story on CNN versus Fox News. I always throw in the extra, watch it on Al Jazeera or watch it on BBC.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Like, holy crap, that is completely different than the two stories I heard on those polar opposite news outlets. It's like
100%.
The Young Turks,
yeah.
I think there's an important one called middle ground, right? And it's really, what you said reminded me of that. And it's not what you said. I'm not correcting something, because you were absolutely correct. There's this concept where some people, I think, will even misunderstand what you said. Right? We say, oh, well, the truth is probably in the middle, right? The truth is in the middle. If
there's not always a middle.
Right. If Joe says blue and I say red, the truth isn't purple necessarily, right?
Right.
And it's ridiculous when you really start to think about it, right? The forget-me-not flower and the legend we've been told is truly ridiculous when you start to think about it from a logical perspective. There are just some of these things where you see it click for some people instantly when you're talking about it. For some people, it never clicks, and some people take it.
Or related to that, like, well, let's just agree to disagree. No, you're wrong in this case. Like, there's no disagreeing. Like, no, there is some truth here in this one example. But yeah,
if someone says, "Hey, the police are here. They're taking a report. There's been an assault or a battery," if and I don't know the difference, and the difference is different in each state, right? So, someone has hit someone. This guy over here saying that the victim was hit 5 times. This guy over here saying the victim was hit 0 times. So logically, we know this guy was punched in the face 2.5 times, right? It doesn't make sense. The truth is the truth, right? And tying this back in a very, I think, poignant way to Masonry, right? Some of us are just a member of the Craft Lodge, what many of us would call Blue Lodge here in America. Some of us are members of appendant and dependent bodies. And I think for those of us who may have joined a lot of groups, we've probably seen or heard something that is, maybe appropriately called the most repeated degree in Masonry. And I won't quote it directly, but I'll quote, I think, the Bible. Because I can quote the Bible without breaking any obligations or oaths, right? Great is truth and mighty above all things. We hear that over and over in certain places. And if that's true, then one would almost say as Masons, we're charged to pursue the truth aggressively, yieldingly. And again, that means don't have an active practice of, okay, for 1 hour a week, I'm going to work on this. It needs to be, I would almost call it a passive thing, like breathing, right? Like our nose doesn't, show up on our eyes radar, but it's there. We breathe without really thinking about it most of the time. There's these things that exist that are really clear, and we just do them. And for me, I've really tried to incorporate this into a daily practice. And we need to understand, I think part of the root is that we need to understand that when someone says something to you, it is not disrespectful. It's not rude to question them. In fact, it's Masonic to question them. Oh, that's interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Thank you. Is there a primary source you can direct me to? Because I'm interested and I want to learn more. And I kind of argue in one of my presentations that there's a way to do this without sounding sarcastic, but we all know the people we're talking to better than I do as a presenter to figure out a non-sarcastic way. I'll never forget when a past master of the lodge told me how to carry the rod, and it was absolutely incorrect. The geometry was just off. And I knew that he was prone to getting upset. And I very calmly said, "Thank you so much, brother. Can I read more about that? I want to make sure I'm doing it correct." I didn't insert any smarminess or know-it-all, or, I joke a lot. I wasn't joking. He turned beet red. He said, "You should believe me. I'm a past master." And I wanted to say, yeah, but I've read the manual of rods V2 with pictures, and this isn't what it shows or describes. But I didn't. I just, okay, well, thank you. But we need to go back to a society, I think, where we question things, right? I think, or to be
comfortable questioning things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as a default, and as a respectful thing, and as a necessary thing, right? Mm-hmm. In IT and in sensitive areas, we really think hard about data at rest and data in motion. It's something that it's some people's job to obsess about, because it's very important from a security aspect, right? But in IT, we also have, the most basic security classes. We'll talk about the CIA triad, which is
confidentiality, integrity, availability. Yes.
Right. So integrity, nerd. If I say a $5 bill is a $5 bill and it's worth $5, it needs to be that, right? With data, it's the same concept. Each block and sector of this data needs to be authentically fit, right? how do we make sure that what people, right? It's interesting, and I can only hope that any time that a conversation like this occurs, is that it'll click for one person in the audience. And I think with your guys' audience, I'm much more hopeful that the numbers will be much closer to 100%. Or I think many of your viewers are already there, and we can see that in the comments. Right. So it's a question of, thanks for the info. How do I verify it? Right.
Right.
How do we verify it with the authenticity? Yeah. Right.
Or there's another phrase in my previous life, which was like trust but verify.
Right. Absolutely. And it's a phrase I've used in that Forget-Me-Not presentation, because again, it's an argument on, it is a presentation about the history of it, but it is a call towards verifying things and the importance of research, right? Some people try to separate Masonic education and research, and everyone has their little, framework that they go by, or their rules or whatever. For me, I would say mine go back to the first step of education is research, because checking the validity of what you're about to say, whether you're a school teacher talking about math or the English language or history, it's the same. You need to be reasonably sure that what you're saying is true. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't go to college until I was pretty much, 29, 30. It was interesting to go through some of these classes, especially in IT and InfoSec. And there were exercises where you took a test and you would try to see what the, without getting political, we know that there are governments of countries that make efforts to manipulate what other countries are consuming fact-wise, media-wise, right? Fact, right? Mm-hmm. And your job is kind of go through this test, this little, it was a website, it was almost like a game, but you had to figure out what was true and wasn't true. It was really fascinating, because in my presentation, I talk about the concept of information literacy. Why do I know?
I like that.
When Brenda in finance calls me at the IT help desk, a much younger James, and Brenda's not real. It's a fake name I use. Well, it's a real name, but not of someone that worked in finance. So
I'm Brenda.
We are all Brenda, and we stand with Brenda. Hashtag support. But why did Brenda say, James, I tried everything you taught us in the email safety campaigns, and I just don't know for sure if this is a good email or a bad email. I moused over the URL to see what the preview said. I looked at the sender's email address. I looked at the font and the kerning and all these, spacing things in the email. I just can't figure it out. I've spent 35, 40 minutes on it, and I decided to call you instead of clicking it. Hey, thanks so much. That's what I'm here for. Let me take a look. Yes, this is a bad email. What? It took you 6 seconds. No, it took me 2 seconds, but it took me longer to say it. Right? We all have, hyper-specific knowledge of certain things, ideally, right? And what's a strength for me, being able to text quickly, might not be a strength for my dad. It definitely isn't a strength for my grandpa,
or Brenda,
right? Or Brenda,
or Brenda,
or last that she is, right? And so, this was probably related to something we were saying, but.
That's good.
But information literacy, right? We can't always be an expert in the subject, but I would argue we probably can have a framework and rules to follow for life, and how we file things away. I like, you're really into data-driven decision making and data-informed things. I have a great interest in that myself, and I found that data visualization or graphics and images really help it click for quite a few people. And allegories or examples that use things that people can visualize, I think are very helpful. If not in the way people understand, at least in the way that I'm able to explain it.
Nice.
I like to think of a filing cabinet that its most simple level has a green folder, a red folder, and then a yellowy orange folder, right? And we can understand this concept to be like more like 30 folders between red and green in different shades that are steps between. But going back to data at rest, data in motion, right? In this address that I made for the Midwest Conference when I was president earlier in May, and I had to cut it short just due to timing. And I knew that going into it. So it was like 3 minutes instead of 15. But in it, I either said or would have said what I've told you, but I'd also say, I think there's 3 opportunities to kind of reflect on information or data as we know it. When it comes out of your mouth, when it goes into your head, and when it's sitting in your head, right? Because if you were to start playing this game, and I challenge the people to play the game with me, James's game. And it was something silly that I thought up, which was like, hey, I want you to play this game with me, at least for the next few hours, if not for the rest of your lives. And you gain positive points by when you say something that's true or would reasonably be true, the average person would reasonably understand that is true. You gain points, maybe a point. When you say something that turns out to not be true or could have been easily verified as disinformation or false or flawed, you lose a point. But what if the stakes are more aggressive, as they often are? You get a point for the truth, and you get -3 points, -5, -15 points for something that's not true. The game gets a lot more aggressive. And if you played the game that way as you went about your daily life, keeping track in your head, you'd realize like, oh, the stakes are pretty high to at least word things in a qualified way, right? You may notice if you're watching this episode on YouTube or some other platform where you could go back that I typically make an effort to say, it's my opinion or I believe, right? I add these qualifying statements because so many people, they're quick to say things in a very definitive way with no wiggle room. And we know that, well, I guess I'll quiz you guys. You know who deals in absolutes?
Only Sith deal in absolutes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I've always thought it was interesting that they say only Sith deal in absolutes, which is an absolutist statement.
I love it. My
Very
man.
definitive. So, but
It's a house of cards. It really is.
so right, if this is the game, right, then for the average viewer, right, the people listening to this, I would challenge you to think about it in this way of when you have information that's about to go into your head or come out of it because you're about to say it or you're about to type it on Facebook or something, you can play that game real quick and realize, hey, I should, for maybe some of us on the hosting side of this, that would be a quick Google because, again, we have pretty good information literacy and we're able to discern good links or bad links. Some people don't have that, right? Their knowledge is in other areas, and that's totally fine, right? But if you start to do this, we record information in our head and we'll think, oh, that's bull crap, right? And if that's your idea, it goes in a red folder, right? In the 3-folder system, if you think, RJ just talked to some dude and they said something their mentor taught them, and he's like, I really would think this is red based on my gut, but I'm also like willing to verify it to find out whatever the truth is. Not my job trying to disprove it or even to prove it, but to find out what the truth is. Then it goes in that middle yellowy orange folder. That's where it goes until you gain supplementary tertiary information about it that allows you to move it up or down in the folder structure, right? And the idea is not to really repeat things from the red or darker side of that folder structure in a way that people would understand to be true.
Until Yeah. So I think between the defrag hard drive metaphor or this folder metaphor, I think you've really given us a good framework to start with when you're trying to approach facts and nuance in a world that is full of gray in between the black and white. So I think that's a good segue to our final question of the night, because we could chat about this all night, and I think it's Brenda's fault that we have to wrap things up a little soon, but I do want to ask you guys the final question of tonight, and we'll save you for last, James. Final question for tonight, based off of this conversation, is what cognitive working tool would you recommend to the curious Mason? So I thought about, do I approach this to the new Mason? But no, there's some people that that've been Masons forever that could still use some help. So to pull the thread on a cognitive working tool, whether it be this framework, whether it be something you've heard, whether it be websites, what would you recommend for the curious Mason who wants to do better at logical discourse? Robert, what say you?
Man, disadvantage for going first, but I guess I think I would really recommend context, understanding context, how to understand context. Something that I think is very important in understanding a lot of issues is just sort of, it's not enough to say context. I don't know that everybody understands what I mean by that, but if you were to know the entire story of something, right? That's the context. For people who are kind of unsure about what I mean, if you know the whole story, then you gain further insights on the motives of individuals involved or ideas that were presented. And then if you know about the times in which these things, the way the world was when these when these things were happening, you start to get a more objective picture that doesn't necessarily strike you as holy cow, that's really messed up, or oh my god, that's so amazing. Instead, you're left with something that allows you to view it, and maybe it's not as fun because it desensationalizes almost everything the more context you put into almost anything. But that is super important. I would recommend studying the context of the things that people are telling you, of the stories you're told, and even Masonic allegories and things. As James said, it's not enough to just say the forget-me-not is a complete fallacy. We would call that hooey. You referenced it earlier today, the difference between malarkey and hooey. It's hooey. It's baloney. So, however, it could also be malarkey because there's an element of politicization behind the reason why those pins were out there. And that's all the story in the context. So that's what I would recommend.
I'm digging it. Jason? Nice. Mm-hmm. I like it. I'm digging it. All right, Joe. What cognitive working tool would you recommend to the curious Mason?
Well, this one's pretty easy. I think the most important cognitive working tool is shutting your mouth. I think that, again, we don't get into discourse with people in general to actually listen to what they have to say, whether it's a truthful fact or whether it's malarkey or even hooey, as we call it. All we do is listen to respond, right? We don't actually use our brains to actually take in what the person is saying, no matter what side of the truth ladder it's sitting on. So, but I think kind of like what Jason was saying, taking that pause and actually listening and absorbing the thing that you are hearing, so that just like that, so you can make a better informed statement or comment, I think is the most important thing. So all these other things, and I'm sure the thing that James is going to say is absolutely phenomenal, and hopefully ties back to Brenda, because I want to know how that story ended. But yeah, just shut your mouth and listen more than speak. James.
Thanks for coming on, James.
Yeah, happy to. Am I going last and John already went?
So you're going second to last. You're the
One always goes last.
That's what. Okay, copy that.
leaders eat last. Yeah.
Is it pronounced leaders or letters? Anyway, so I would say be skeptical yet convincible. Have a respectful curiosity about the world around you and about whether things are true or if they're not true, with the goal of getting to the truth. And to do that, put effort in, as you're figuring out where to fill your day in accordance with the 24-inch gauge. Think about things from a logical perspective and not an emotional perspective. Mm-hmm. Work on this concept of, Peter Pan and his shadow detaching. And if the shadow is emotion and the emotional part of you, separate it, right? We talk about the yin yang, the yin yang, mm-hmm. and people separate it, but it's a single symbol. We forget that it's a single symbol, and you have the black with the white. And it's not good and evil in the sense that, God, I wish we only had the half. They're necessary parts of the whole, right? At least for this allegorical argument. It's the same. We have fear. We have these things as an emotional response for a reason. But if we can detach ourselves, unsew ourselves from our shadow real quick and just think with the logic, I think we'd all be a lot better off. Can you imagine showing up to watch a debate, whether it's your high school debate team or a political debate, and everyone involved has made a reasonable effort to make sure that everything they're saying is true?
Oh, and wow.
It's more logic-based than emotion, and they can put the emotional tone into their voice, but it is logic-based, right?
How great would that be?
Yeah, it's I think it's important. There's a few quotes that I have in my presentation, and I wanted to read one or two. George Bernard Shaw is attributed to having said, "Beware of false knowledge. It is more dangerous than ignorance." Tolstoy has a bigger quote that says, "The most difficult subjects can be explained to the most slow-witted man if he has not formed any idea of them already. But the simplest thing cannot be made clear to the most intelligent man if he is firmly persuaded that he knows already, without a shadow of a doubt, what is laid before him." Mm-hmm. It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled, right? And so I would say the bigger picture with my answer is going for, and on the Logical Fallacy website, you guys can look this up, confirmation bias. People are so entrenched in what they know or what they believe they know that it is incredibly hard to dissuade them to move off their position as king of the hill of incorrect or downright stupid. And I think, again, if we have that respectful pursuit of curiosity and knowledge around us, we can go through our life, we can go through every day, every moment. It really is a constant thing. And it's to your benefit, guys. It's to your benefit. You want to turn yourself green so everyone else will be green with envy. But be the best version of you, right? As a Mason, place each brick with intent. And if you find out there's a brick that may be cracked, you get a report that there's trouble with the foundation, you can go and look. Confirmation bias would say, that brick's probably fine, and you walk away, right? But the mature masculine, the correct response is to think about, I'd rather fix this now than to suffer the consequences of finding out that this is bad.
Yeah.
I could ramble. I know it's a long answer, but I'll stop there.
Could you, though? Could you?
I will fill
He will.
a session of TMR or filibuster, whatever.
Awesome.
No filibusters.
Great. No, I love it. So I'm glad you mentioned this website again. This is absolutely a site I go back to often. Yourbias.is and yourlogicalfallacyis.com. Two separate sites that are two halves of the same ownership. And one tool of many that I like on here. So one of the logical fallacies is the straw man argument, where you misrepresent someone's argument to make it easy to attack. Well, you just mean this, so therefore that's awful, right? But it's not, you're not catching all the nuance. And one technique to avoid doing straw man attacks, or to do the straw man fallacy, is called doing the steel manning, or to do a steel man, where your job is to know your opponent's position better than they do, like to really truly know it, as if. And one way to even test that theory is, could I debate someone on that side as if I believed that, and it would be convincing enough that they would say, yes, that John is on my side because he has laid out this argument so well that I couldn't tell if he had a differing opinion or not. So that steel manning is a great tool, especially when you're doing facilitation, you're listening, you're coaching people, and you're like, okay, let me make sure I heard this right. Let me repeat back what you said, and let me make sure that I know where you're coming from. And that is so important in today's society, to really, like you said, not wait until your turn to talk, but to truly listen and respond. That, I think, is a key tool there.
And I think that touches on everyone else's answer as well, right? Because you're being convincible. Someone explained steel manning to me once as saying the first step was to firmly understand someone's position in a way that, like, as you said, they could explain it, right? Which goes back to what RJ said about understanding the greater context. Because so much we just have this snap emotional decision on what we believe someone means. And so often we're wrong. And we see this in the English language, in written language. Actually, we see this in Masonry in
all the time. Yep.
A single word difference can make literally all the difference in a jurisprudence interpretation or a case, right?
Yeah.
Shall or may are two very different words.
It makes a difference. All right. Last thing I'll add in is, on those websites, they do sell cards that actually have, these different biases and fallacies on there. They are fantastic, and they actually have a card game you can play with these that I've done, and it's fascinating just to sit down and watch the news, or, like you said, watch the debate. And every time you think you hear one, you find the card that fallacy or that bias shows up, because you get more attuned to it. You start to hear it more. And by having the knowledge, hopefully, you'll catch yourself doing it as well, and therefore be a better man and a better Mason because of it. So those are some tools that I would use. Steel manning, and just buy the cards, man. It's great because you can carry them everywhere you go. So with that, I want to thank you all very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. That's it. Have a good night.